Good evening, Professor P. and my fellow classmates. This evening I will be discussing the social issue of global sex trafficking. My presentation is entitled A Promiscuous Business. What exactly is sex trafficking? Well, simply put, it's modern-day slavery. It is the recruitment, abduction, transportation, harboring, buying, or selling of persons using force, fraud, or coercion. Globally, an estimated 71% of enslaved people are women and girls, while men and boys account for 29%. Now, where does sex trafficking occur? Unfortunately, sex trafficking is a social issue that is often neither seen nor heard. The top 4 countries for sex trafficking from 2011 to 2018 were Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Iran, and North Korea. Now here in San Diego, we have been ranked in the top 8 high-density areas for commercial sexual exploitation of children in the nation, which is pretty astonishing. But it's also no surprise considering that we are both a border and an international border. Estimates suggest that 250,000 people are trafficked each year in Latin America and 16,000 children in Mexico alone. As far as prevention and prosecution, there are many organizations, both government, non-government, and nonprofit, that battle the social issue of sex trafficking. For example, here in San Diego, Girls Inc. of San Diego County reaches at-risk girls from the ages of 10 to 18 while using their PROTECT curriculum. They are educating them about the dangers of sex trafficking and bringing awareness. San Diego County, like many counties and districts, have a sex trafficking unit within their law enforcement, consisting of specialized prosecutors, investigators, paralegals, victim advocates, and staff. In 2011, the first national law on human trafficking was passed in Mexico. A published trafficking report and new leadership brought attention to anti-trafficking efforts. Now, where do the opportunities lie? And what are the other issues that stem from this social business? Well, victims are often prejudicially dismissed and often seen as the problem of immigrants. Unfortunately, many people will dismiss this issue considering it a consequence of open border or immigration. Victims are often treated as criminals and deemed prostitutes or drug mules, and they're not giving the resources that they need to remove themselves from these situations. Both government and non-government organizations also face challenges within their own networks and as they connect with others. These challenges include a lack of funds, a lack of leadership, data, and human rights protection. Not only that, they also endure extreme violence and corruption while on the field. They are the front liners. They're there to rescue, rehabilitate victims and survivors, and to coordinate with law enforcement to lead to prosecution. And there's other legal problems, including the definition of sex trafficking and the scarcity of comprehensive data that's collected or not collected, and adequate measures to prosecute traffickers and protect victims. Unfortunately, the resources and funds that are needed to be more productive in bringing traffickers to justice is just non-existent. funding is so limited and other crimes are seen as a priority, such as murder, drugs, and so sex trafficking victims and traffickers don't get the attention that's necessary. Now, what drives this business? What's the motivation behind it? Why does it exist? Well, money. It's simply money is the biggest driver for traffickers. And yearly, there are $99 billion worth of global profits. And in San Diego, $810 million were made from the illicit sex trade in just 1 year. And that is such an astonishing statistic, and it really puts things into perspective. And it almost makes you wonder how could this booming business be so, you know, under the radar as it is. It's just amazing. And what inspired me to choose this topic was the fact that Professor P had given her image analysis on sex trafficking in San Diego County, and I was just shocked to learn that 80% of trafficking victims are, in fact, domestic. They're not foreign people or immigrants. Even though here in San Diego, we are both, we are a border to Mexico as well as internationally. And human trafficking is also fueled by high reward and a low risk dynamic. There's so much money and profit to be made, and with little prosecution, it's worth the risk to traffickers. And for victims, it is also a means of income or, unfortunately, survival. And an increased demand for commercial sex, especially with young girls and boys, incentivizes commercial sex venues. And obviously, when it comes to a business, if there's a need, that need will be met, and you have a business, you have customers, you have a product, and that's unfortunately how it works in this situation. And of course, systematic inequalities and disparities make certain groups more vulnerable to exploitation. Low income people, broken families, children in situations where they are not receiving the love and attention that they need, it's found elsewhere. And they are so vulnerable, and this is where traffickers come and meet those needs. And another example includes factory workers, who are not paid a living wage. Therefore, they are forced, to look elsewhere. They need to provide for their families. And unfortunately, the sex business is one to where they can work around their families and their other jobs and make the money they need to take care of themselves and their families. Now, what can we do about it as a community, as a country, as our world? What is something that we can implement or do to help create prevention and awareness? Well, my suggestion is that all state and federally funded schools be required to provide sex trafficking education to all students in order to create that awareness and prevention. Now, this idea was inspired by our hackathon discussion. One of my fellow students discussed how, growing up here in San Diego, her high school was actually near some sex trafficking rings, and, she was not ever educated in school about the dangers or prevention or support or anything of that sort. And it really opened my eyes to the need. Unfortunately, she never found herself in that situation, but how many girls did, and boys, that could have been prevented if they would have at least been given the opportunity to know that that danger existed. And we can incorporate the conversation with sex education classes or as a separate program. We can hire experts and volunteers, such as Girls Inc. of San Diego, to conduct presentations and provide a constant point of contact for at-risk students. School board members coordinate with public officials and law enforcement and use their social platforms and media to integrate and sustain the programs. It's really about those people who have the voice to use it and to advocate and push for these programs to not only be implemented but sustained. And the whole purpose of implementing these programs is to give our girls and boys the tools they need for if and when they are ever approached by traffickers, when they find themselves in these vulnerable situations. Oftentimes, traffickers are people that we know, family, friends, peers, people that we trust, and that trust is then taken advantage of and manipulated. And another example is boyfriending. It's a common thread to many. It's a situation where lovers spoil their partners in the beginning, but then manipulate and abuse them after they have earned their trust. This type of recruitment is often motivated by the opportunity for traffickers to pimp their victims, which often turns out to be for the purpose of prostituting and to take advantage of these victims. On my final slide, you'll see my doodle, and I do admit I am not particularly an artist, but here you'll see a young woman, and she is dressed in expensive clothes and shoes, and this older gentleman is approaching her with these gifts and money, and the little smirk on his face that I put really shows that what he's saying is opposite of what he's thinking, and that he's really driven by the opportunity to make money off of her and to use and abuse her. And so we see, unfortunately, that she's deceived. She's kind of blinded by this love and attention that maybe she didn't have otherwise in her life. And, unfortunately, this is something that happens regularly. But if we could just provide, a level of awareness, at least giving the opportunity for everyone to, be educated and have the resources that they need to prevent these situations, because stopping these traffickers, seems like an impossible task. Prosecution, yes, but we as, you know, guardians of each other and ourselves really need to be there for each other and provide those resources that can prevent these situations. Thank you for everyone for listening. I'm looking forward to watching and listening to the rest of the other presentations. Thank you very much and enjoy your evening.